Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise to support the legislation passed by the House of Representatives. And first, I wanted to just thank a few people as well for their work on this bill. First, I'd like to thank our Senate President, Senator Looney, for his work and advocacy on this issue, knowing this is an important one for our state and that helping to bring this bill forward and to a vote tonight. Senator Cassano, the chair of the Planning and Development Committee, Senator Needleman, the vice chair, for their work, Representative McCarthy, Vahey, House Majority Leader Rojas, who've all spent a lot of time on this, our staff, Teresa Govert, Bill Baccaro, Joel Rudikoff, and outside groups even like in Darien, who has worked to try and ensure that accurate information has gotten out about really what is a very critical issue here in our state. So the question is, why are we here this evening, and why is this bill before us tonight, in this year, in this session? Madam President, when the murder of George Floyd occurred a year ago, there were literally marches in every single community in the state of Connecticut. And it was something that had never occurred before in our state. And people of all races and ages and ethnicities came together and said, we must do better, and we can do better. And a promise to look inside ourselves and our state to make our state an even better place, to say and acknowledge something that we've all known for far too long about our state being segregated based on race, ethnicity, and income, and the fact that we can make our state a better place. We can be stronger when we are not isolated from each other based on our race and our income, our ethnicity, or any other factor that's out there. And so when we marched in the communities, when I marched in Norwalk and I marched in Darien, and people marched across the state, we said, Black Lives Matter, and we said that we intend to do better in this state so that people can live in various communities and not just be relegated to cities or places where there is a greater stock of housing and where people aren't shut out because of the fact that housing has been set up, or zoning has been set up for years to basically exclude people from moving there. And that was an important point, because I think that there have been a number of people over the years who have tried to get us here now, but because of the fact that that moment wasn't with us, we weren't able to actually get there. So while I am a bit frustrated at this bill that it's not as strong as it could be, or should be, this vote tonight, and with the governor's signature, is a very important step on our road to ensuring that Connecticut sheds itself from being one of the most segregated states in the nation. We live in a great state. If you ask anybody about our state, it is a great state. We have beautiful communities and a beautiful coastline and parks and so much going for us. We have an excellent workforce, but we are lacking in the ability for people to have the right or the ability to live in various communities in our state. Madam President, if you look at the census that came out, it showed that Connecticut only grew its population by 1%. And I would attribute some of that to the fact that it's not from a lack of building in our cities. As we have cities like Stamford and Norwalk, Hartford and New Haven, Bridgeport, we're building. building apartments, building houses. People are moving in. They're moving into our urban areas. And that's great. But that doesn't solve the problem. We're not building around our train stations in our suburban towns. We're not building in all the places where we can build. And that's not to say that we want to ruin a town's character or in some way, shape, or form change what has made Connecticut so wonderful. We want to have a state that people feel like they can come in and move to because Connecticut is so beautiful. But let's give people a chance to live in our communities, in all of our communities, not just some of our communities. Every town, I live in Norwalk, and we have ordinances about affordable housing. Every community should be striving towards having a diverse housing stock, not just a few communities. Every community should be doing that. And again, Madam President, I believe that this legislation is so important to take us on that step to where we need to be. And as was said by my colleague and friend, Senator Haskell, there's this misinformation that somehow that this bill is taking away local control. That is the furthest thing from the truth. We have in our state constitution something called home rule, which we still honor, of course, because that's in our state constitution. But we also need to make sure that we are working towards setting the guardrails, as was said earlier by one of my colleagues. And to me, there's no Hartford bureaucrats who are deciding what's happening in Norwalk or Darien or New Canaan or Westport or any other communities across the state of Connecticut. We're setting those guardrails. I have a lot of respect for local planning and zoning officials in all communities, and as Senator Haskell said, they do a hard job. But they also are not infallible Greek philosophers brought back from centuries ago who make perfect decisions on planning and zoning. They are people just like us. And so we set the policy here in the state of Connecticut. And our policy should be that our communities are one in which we welcome everyone. And if we want to make sure that we continue to grow jobs in this state, we have to have the people in this state to fill those jobs. It's not a chicken and egg scenario. The scenario is when you have a diverse housing stock and you have people coming into the state to live here, the businesses will come in because we have the ready workforce. We talk about that all the time, even in Eastern Connecticut with Electric Boat. They're growing jobs. They need to find the people. We need to make sure we have the housing stock so they can find the people to work at those jobs. Same thing in Fairfield County. Having a hard time finding people to fill those jobs because lots of times there's just not the available housing for people to move into those, the homes here in the state of Connecticut. We all know right now we have a housing boom that's going on. In my other job, we have sometimes in one house that's on the market, you'll have 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15 offers on one house. You'll have people who have bid on 4, 5, or 6 houses and have lost them because there's not enough housing in our state right now. We have seniors who are moving because there's no place for them to downsize. We have people who are graduating who don't stay here because there's not a place for them to move into when they graduate for them to start. We can't just be a state where it's set for people who are of a certain age group or certain age bracket, where they're just looking for that single family home with a white picket fence on a certain amount of property. We have to have a housing stock that is good for people who are graduating college, our teachers, our firefighters, our police officers, the people who service at Dunkin' Donuts and Walmart and CVS, the people who might be in transition. We have to think about all those things, about how we're going to grow the state. People a lot of times talk about places down south that are growing. Yeah, they're growing, and you see the cranes in the air where they're building more and more housing. How many of us go into our communities and see cranes in the air? And I bet that answer is very few. Very few. And that's why we have to change some of the rules of the road, where we have to say that Connecticut can maintain the bucolic feel that we have. But that doesn't mean that we do that and exclude people in our state, or we exclude people from coming in. Or that we say, I'm here, I'm sorry, you can't be here. That's not who we are. And if we're going to grow over the long term, if we're going to have growth that's better than 1% over 10 years, if we're going to make sure that people who retire can still stay here in the state of Connecticut, if we're going to make sure that people who graduate after we put tons of investment in our education funding, in our colleges, we want them to stay here, we need to build that housing. We need to make sure we have that housing stock. If we want to make sure that we start tackling our traffic issues in the state of Connecticut, then how about we stop having people who have to drive 20 or 30 or 40 miles to get to work? If we believe in family values in this state, then why are we telling people that they cannot find a place to live in the community in which they work, but yet they've got to leave 45 minutes to an hour or more just to get to work, and they can't spend that time with their kids? So let's be consistent about what we're saying here with our policies. And there's not a one-size-fits-all policy. But again, we made a promise last year that we were going to do better. We made a promise that we were going to shed that exclusiveness in many of our communities. And we made a promise that we would look to make the communities that we have more diverse, because that is our strength. That is the strength that we have, is in our diversity, our racial diversity, our ethnic diversity, and our economic diversity. We learn when we work with people and interact with people who are different from us. That's how we have a better state. That's how we do it better. So, Madam President, I believe that we can come back in the future and work on these issues and strengthen what we have started tonight, but we have to start somewhere. We have to take that first step. And I know it's difficult for people because everybody wants to make sure that their local folks are happy with the various things that we do. But this is a vote of courage to take this vote tonight, because it is a first step, not a last step, in what we're doing, and making our state that welcoming place that we said and we promised we would do when we were all marching last year. So I urge my colleagues to support this legislation tonight, and to know that this is a good vote, a smart vote towards a better Connecticut. Thank you, Madam President.